There is a sign on Route 190 that most drivers don't read carefully enough. It says the next services are 72 miles away. Not the next town, not the next gas station. Services. And if you are reading that sign from a car with a quarter tank of gas in July, with no cell signal, and the outside temperature sitting at 119 degrees, that sign is not informational. It is a verdict. What Route 190 actually is. Here is something almost nobody thinks about when they plan a drive through Death Valley. The road they are going to take is not a road that anyone particularly wanted to build. It is a road that one man built with 6 other men, a Caterpillar tractor, and a personal obsession so stubborn it survived 4 rejections from a county board of supervisors, opposition from one of the most powerful mining companies in California, and the general consensus of everyone who knew the desert that the whole idea was ridiculous. California State Route 190 runs 131 miles from the town of Olancha in the west to the Nevada border in the east. It is the primary paved crossing of Death Valley National Park. Drive it end to end, and it takes about 2.5 hours. Those 2.5 hours cross the most extreme vertical geography in the contiguous United States. The western approach climbs a mountain pass at nearly 5,000 feet. An hour later, you are at Badwater Basin, 282 feet below sea level, the lowest point in North America. The greatest elevation change in the lower 48 happens within a single tank of gas. Most roads crossing that terrain take decades and billions of dollars. Route 190 took 4 months and no dynamite. The man who built it. The man's name was Herman William Eichbaum. Everyone called him Bob, and the reason there is a road through Death Valley at all, the reason 1 million people a year drive into the hottest place on earth, the reason the sign about the next services is there to be misread, starts with Bob Eichbaum standing in the desert in 1905 and deciding that what he was looking at was beautiful. Eichbaum had come west from Pennsylvania as a young engineer during the Rhyolite Gold Rush. Rhyolite, Nevada was one of those desert boom towns that the early 1900s specialized in producing, a place that went from a tent city to a town with electric lights and an opera house in about 3 years, and then went from an opera house back to empty desert in about 5 more. Eichbaum built Rhyolite's first electrical plant in 1906. He was good at that kind of thing. Practical problems with physical solutions in difficult places. It was a particular skill set. While working the Bullfrog Mining District, he traveled south across 60 miles of open desert into Death Valley. He saw what everyone who has ever seen Death Valley sees, a landscape so geologically extravagant, so stripped of everything familiar and comfortable, so visually specific that it registers not quite as a place but as an argument that the world is stranger and more extreme than you had previously been led to believe. He also saw the heat. He was not stupid, but he noticed something that nobody else had connected yet. Death Valley's winters are extraordinary. Mild temperatures, crystalline desert light, salt flats that turn pink at dusk, sand dunes that shift and reorganize themselves while you watch. And by the 1920s, Americans were buying automobiles at a rate that nobody had anticipated. The number of registered cars in the United States tripled between 1920 and 1930, from 8 million to 23 million. People were driving. They were inventing the road trip. They were looking for somewhere to go. Eichbaum watched Rhyolite die around 1910, went to Los Angeles, married a woman named Helene, started a sightseeing company on Catalina Island, built electric trams in Venice, made money, and spent 15 years being comfortable while never quite letting go of the idea. In 1925, he sold the Catalina business and went back to the desert. His plan was to build a toll road from Darwin Wash on the western side of the Panamint Range over the mountains and down into the valley at Stovepipe Wells, where he would build a resort. The Inyo County Board of Supervisors rejected him 3 times. A local mine owner called the whole scheme confiscation. The Pacific Coast Borax Company, which had been mining the valley for decades, sent representatives to testify against him. The third vote failed 3-2. Eichbaum was not a man who took 3 rejections as an answer. He went to the 2 supervisors who had voted in his favor and asked them what it would take. They told him to get local support, including from the Borax Company. He got it. He appeared before the board a 4th time. The vote was unanimous. Inyo County Resolution number 2516 authorized him to build and operate the Death Valley Toll Road. He hired a superintendent named Miller, whose first name does not appear in any record that anyone has ever found, assembled a crew of 6 to 8 men, and started at Darwin Wash. No dynamite. When the road hit a rocky outcropping, it went around it. The result was a road that wound and climbed and occasionally became quite genuinely terrifying, but always found a way through. By Christmas of 1925, they had reached the summit of Town Pass at 4,962 feet. The road was completed on May 4, 1926, 35 miles of graded desert road, 16 feet wide, connecting the Western world to a valley that had been killing people since 1849. The toll was $2 per automobile. Today, that road is a national scenic byway. About 1 million people drive it every year. Not bad for a road to nowhere. The architecture of death. Now, I want to explain what makes Route 190 different from any other road in the country because it is not simply a matter of heat. Every desert road gets hot. Route 190 is something structurally different. It is a road that runs through a landscape specifically designed by geology to concentrate and amplify heat to a degree that the rest of the planet has never matched. Death Valley runs roughly north to south, a long narrow trough between two mountain ranges, the Panamint Range to the west, which Route 190 crosses on its way in, and the Amargosa Range to the east, which Route 190 crosses on its way out. The valley floor at its lowest point, Badwater Basin, sits 282 feet below sea level. The valley is, in the most literal and geological sense, a bowl. During summer, sunlight strikes the valley floor, which is dark rock, salt flat, alkali pan, and almost no vegetation, and heats that surface to temperatures that are genuinely difficult to believe until you have read them several times. In July of 1972, the ground temperature at Furnace Creek was measured at 201 degrees Fahrenheit. That is 11 degrees short of the boiling point of water. If you put on your thickest shoes and stepped onto that ground, you would have roughly 1 second before you understood the problem. The air above that surface heats rapidly, rises, hits the steep mountain walls on either side, and is forced back down into the valley. The valley acts like an oven with the door sealed shut. The mountains trap the hot air. The prevailing winds blow east to west, but the valley runs north to south, so no breeze cuts through to flush the heat out. The air just recycles. And every time it recycles, it gets hotter. On July 10th, 1913, the weather station at Furnace Creek recorded an air temperature of 134 degrees Fahrenheit. That remains, as of today, the official world record for the highest air temperature ever measured on the surface of the Earth. Some meteorologists dispute the reading. Christopher Burt, a respected climatologist, argued in 2016 that the measurement was essentially not reproducible from a meteorological standpoint. The World Meteorological Organization still recognizes it. And regardless of whether you accept the 1913 number, the temperatures that Death Valley routinely produces are staggering enough without it. In August 2020, Furnace Creek hit 130 degrees. In July 2021, 130 again. The summer of 1996 saw 40 days above 120 degrees and 105 days above 110. In the summer of 2001, the temperature stayed above 100 degrees for 154 consecutive days. Here's the thing about Death Valley that people who have never been there get wrong. They imagine that the nights provide relief, that the desert cools after dark the way it does in the movies. It does not. The overnight low sometimes does not drop below 100 degrees. On July 5th, 1918, the lowest temperature recorded that entire day was 110 degrees. That is still higher than the all-time high temperature ever recorded in Florida. In Death Valley, nighttime is not cooler. It is just darker. All of this matters to anyone driving Route 190 in summer because the road does not exist outside of physics. It exists inside them. The heat affects your engine. It affects your tires. It affects the cooling system that is working twice as hard just to keep the car from dying. On the long climb out of the valley on Route 190 heading west, the grade reaches 10% in places. Steep enough that the National Park Service has posted signs telling drivers to turn off their air conditioning to prevent the engine from overheating. Read that again slowly. In a place where the air temperature can reach 120 degrees, you are being officially advised to turn off the only thing keeping you alive in the car, because if you don't, the car itself will die. That is the transaction Route 190 is offering you on a July afternoon. The car or you. Pick one. Tire pressure rises roughly 1 pound per square inch for every 10 degrees of temperature increase. The pavement surface temperature in Death Valley in summer can reach 150 degrees. A tire that is slightly underinflated or slightly worn, or slightly anything, flexes more under that heat, builds up internal pressure, and can fail at highway speed. A blown tire on a paved road with cell service is an inconvenience you tell people about later. A blown tire on a dirt track off Route 190 with no cell service, no spare, a full sun overhead, and a 115-degree air temperature is a survival situation. And survival situations in Death Valley compress into emergencies faster than anywhere else on the continent. And here is the detail that makes the whole thing almost incomprehensible. If something goes badly wrong on Route 190 in summer, the emergency helicopters cannot reach you. They cannot operate safely in air temperatures above 120 degrees. The heat affects rotor performance and reduces lift to the point where flight becomes genuinely dangerous. In July 2024, when a German motorcyclist collapsed and could not be revived near Badwater Basin, the helicopters could not fly to Furnace Creek. A passing stranger drove him 19 miles to the nearest point of help. From there, a ground ambulance drove 62 miles to a small hospital in Pahrump, Nevada. From Pahrump, a helicopter finally airlifted him to Las Vegas. Stranger, ambulance, helicopter, hospital, hospital. That is the chain of events between you and actual medical care on a bad day on Route 190. On a good day, you will never know it exists. The 3 gas stations. Let us talk about the fuel problem, because the fuel problem is what kills people on this road more reliably than anything else. It looks like simple arithmetic until it becomes something else entirely. Death Valley National Park is 5,270 square miles, larger than Rhode Island and Delaware combined. Within that space, there are 3 gas stations. 3. Furnace Creek, Stovepipe Wells, and Panamint Springs. That is it. That is the entire fuel infrastructure for an area roughly the size of a New England state. Furnace Creek charges accordingly. In late 2023, visitors were paying above $8 a gallon. This is not price gouging. It is the cost of getting fuel to the lowest point in North America in 115-degree heat. You want convenience in the most inconvenient place on the continent? It costs what it costs. Stovepipe Wells sells only 87 octane and no diesel. Panamint Springs keeps limited hours and is not always open when you need it to be, which is the kind of sentence that seems like a minor inconvenience until you are sitting on empty at 4 in the afternoon in July. The stations are 25 to 30 miles apart along the main road, which sounds fine until you remember that nobody just drives the main road. They detour to Badwater Basin, to Dante's View, to Racetrack Playa, 40 miles of unpaved road to see rocks that slide by themselves, which honestly fair enough, but every detour burns fuel. And the air conditioning, which is not optional, is running the entire time. A car that gets 30 miles per gallon in San Diego might get 20 here. An RV might get 8. There is no cell service to do the math for you. There is no one to call when the math comes out wrong. Fill the tank all the way before you enter the park. The road kills specifically. The history of Route 190 is, in part, a history of the ways people have misunderstood the road they were on. And the misunderstandings are never dramatic. They are always small. A wrong turn, a blown tire, a GPS that does not know what the desert knows. In July of 1996, a family of 4 German tourists arrived at Death Valley in a rented green Plymouth Voyager minivan. Egbert Rimkus was 34, an architect from Dresden. His girlfriend Cornelia Meyer was 27. With them were Egbert's 11-year-old son, Georg, and Cornelia's 4-year-old son, Max. They had been having a good trip. Las Vegas, San Clemente, the Treasure Island Hotel. Death Valley was a detour on the way back to Los Angeles. They stopped at the Furnace Creek Visitor Center. They bought German language guides. They drove south, saw the sights, camped in Hanaupa Canyon on the quiet western side that most tourists never see. The next day, Cornelia signed a visitor's log at an abandoned mining camp and wrote that they would be heading over the pass, almost certainly Mengel Pass, a rough mountain crossing that is essentially impassable in a 2-wheel drive minivan. Nobody told them that. The log did not ask. On a dirt track called Anvil Canyon Road, Egbert hit a rock and blew a tire. Then another, then a third. The van kept going on 3 flats for roughly 2 more miles before sinking to its axles and stopping for good. Stranded. July. 120 degrees, limited water. And on Egbert's map, roughly 8 or 9 miles to the south, the northern boundary of the China Lake Naval Weapons Center. He was German. In Germany, military installations have fences, guards, constant patrols. You walk to the perimeter and someone finds you. It is a completely reasonable assumption if you have spent your entire life in Germany and exactly zero time in the Mojave Desert. China Lake covers over 1 million acres and is used primarily as a bombing range. There are no patrols, there is no perimeter fence, there is nothing out there but sand, rock, creosote bush, and occasionally live ordnance. Egbert was more likely to find an unexploded bomb than another human being. But he did not know that. He locked the van, took his family, and started walking south toward help that did not exist. The van was not found for 3 months. The search that followed turned up one object, a single beer bottle under a bush about 1.5 miles from the van. For 13 years after that, nothing. Internet forums decided the family had faked their disappearance. Others blamed a military cover-up. Then Tom Mayhood, a search and rescue worker who had been haunted by the case since 1996, went looking in the one direction the official search had refused to consider, south. On November 12, 2009, he found them. A day planner in German, a wine bottle, a wallet, an ID card reading Cornelia Meyer, and then the bones, 8 miles from the van, 4 miles from China Lake, on terrain so empty that even knowing exactly where to look, it had taken 13 years. The children, Georg and Max, the 11-year-old and the 4-year-old, were never conclusively identified. Small bones were found nearby, too degraded by 13 years of desert sun for DNA confirmation. Interpol still lists both children as missing. That sentence has not changed in 15 years. In August of 2009, a nurse from Las Vegas named Alicia Sanchez drove into Death Valley with her 11-year-old son, Carlos, 24 bottles of water, some cheese sandwiches, Pop-Tarts, a Chihuahua, and no maps. Her GPS directed her down a 30-mile dirt road in the far southwestern corner of the park. Near the end of that road, where it bends sharply right, she went left. The Jeep dropped into a collapsed animal burrow and sank to its axles in sand. 5 days later, Carlos died in the back of the Jeep. He was 11 years old, the same age as Georg Grimkus. In April of 2021, Alexander Lofgren and his girlfriend Emily Henkel drove into Death Valley fully prepared. Filed itinerary, survival gear, topographic maps. They had done everything right. On a remote stretch of Gold Valley Road, they hit a rock. 2 tires shredded at once. They wrote a note and left it on the dashboard before starting to hike out. Lofgren fell in the canyon. Henkel climbed down to help him and shattered her ankle in the fall. He died in her arms 30 minutes later. For 6 days, she sat on a ledge next to his body, rationing water, keeping her phone charged with a solar panel, recording goodbye messages to her family because she did not know if anyone was coming. They came because of the note on the dashboard. 2 minutes of writing, 1 piece of paper. That is the margin between Emily Henkel alive and Emily Henkel not found for 13 years. The Valley does not grade on effort. It does not reward preparation with guaranteed survival. What it rewards, the only thing it consistently rewards, is the slim bureaucratic act of telling someone where you are going before you go. Why people come anyway, and yet people keep coming. Every summer, the park receives a spike in visitors who come specifically to experience the heat. They fly to Las Vegas, rent a car, and drive 2.5 hours to Furnace Creek to take a photograph of the thermometer, which, to be fair, is a deeply human thing to do. People have always traveled to the edges of things. To the places where the world gets extreme, there is something in the thermometer photograph that is not entirely different from what Bob Eichbaum felt standing in the valley in 1905. The recognition that you are somewhere genuinely extraordinary, somewhere that the rest of the world does not have. In 2024. Even after the motorcyclist's death made national news, the parking lot at Badwater Basin was crowded. People posted selfies, families brought children, tour buses from Las Vegas arrived on schedule. The park does not close for heat. It posts warnings. It advises against hiking after 10 in the morning. It tells people to carry water. And then a 57-year-old man named Peter Hayes Robino walked a 1-mile loop trail at Natural Bridge on August 1st, 2024 in 119-degree heat, made it back to his car, got behind the wheel, drove off a 20-foot embankment because the heat had made him too confused to steer, and died in the parking lot while bystanders tried to get him into the shade. He had completed the hike. He had made it back to his car. The trail was easy, well-marked, 1-mile round trip, and he was dead by 4:42 in the afternoon. The cause of death was hyperthermia. His body had simply overheated past the point of return, and there was nothing left to do about it. Between 2007 and 2023, approximately 68 people died in Death Valley National Park. Nearly 20% of those deaths were from hypothermia. Every single one of those people arrived in a car. Many of them had working air conditioning. Some of them were on paved roads. The gap between safe and dead in Death Valley is not a gap that technology reliably closes. It is a gap that the valley measures in degrees and minutes, and it does not negotiate. The road itself has character. Here is what Route 190 actually is, as a physical object you are driving on. The western approach climbs over Town Pass at just under 5,000 feet. Bob Eichbaum's original grade is still underneath the modern pavement in places. The state widened it, smoothed the worst curves, improved the surface. But the route is his. The judgment of where to climb, where to turn, how to thread through the canyon without dynamite, that is the work of a man with a Caterpillar tractor who had to build around every obstacle rather than through it. Coming down the eastern side of the pass, the road descends 16 miles down Emigrant Wash to the valley floor. The grade reaches 10% in places. This is where the sign about turning off your air conditioning appears. Eichbaum's construction crew would have driven mules down this grade. You are driving an internal combustion engine, same principle. Do not make the engine work harder than it has to. At the valley floor, the road crosses the Mesquite Flat sand dunes on a modern bridge of pavement that goes exactly where Eichbaum could not make his road go in 1926. The dunes stopped him. They forced him to end his road where the sand ended and build his resort where the lumber truck could reach. Today's Route 190 crosses them as if they are not there, which is either a triumph of engineering or an act of hubris, depending on the summer. East of Stovepipe Wells, the road runs across the valley floor toward Furnace Creek. This is the section where the pavement shimmers and the road appears to dissolve into the heat in both directions simultaneously. The optical effect is not subtle. The asphalt surface temperature can reach 150 degrees. The air above it bends light. The mountains on either side appear to float. If you have ever wondered what a place looks like when it is actively trying to be incomprehensible, the valley floor on Route 190 in July is the answer. East of Furnace Creek, the road climbs again over the Amargosa Range and out of the park toward Nevada. The eastern side is less dramatic than the western approach, but do not be fooled by comparative terms. Less dramatic than the western side of Death Valley is still more than most people have ever experienced behind a steering wheel. The entire 131 miles is a road that is asking you a continuous question. Do you understand where you are? Not where you are on a map, not what the name of the valley is, but where you are in terms of what the landscape will and will not do for you if something goes wrong. The road is asking this question at every mile marker, and most people, driving in air-conditioned comfort, listening to a podcast, watching the scenery, are not listening for it. The Timbisha Shoshone have lived in Death Valley for at least 1,000 years. They called it Tumpisa, rock paint, for the red ochre clay found in the hills, not Death Valley. They did not need that name. The name you give a place reflects your relationship to it. And their relationship was not terror. It was knowledge. They knew the springs, they knew the seasons. They moved between the valley floor in winter and the mountain camps in summer, following the water and the shade. When the 1849ers stumbled through in 1849, burning their wagons for warmth and eating their starved oxen, the Timbisha watched. By some accounts, they tried to help. The pioneers did not know what the Timbisha knew, that you do not fight this place. You accommodate it. You carry more than you think you need, and you never assume the next water is where the map says it is. One of those pioneers, finally climbing out over the Panamints, looked back at the salt flat stretching behind them and said goodbye to the valley. The name stuck because it was earned. The Timbisha called it rock paint. The 49ers called it death. The difference between those two names is the difference between 1,000 years of knowledge and a few weeks of desperate improvisation. 175 years later, the valley kills for exactly the same reason. People arrive as tourists in a national park and behave as if that designation means something the landscape has agreed to honor. It has not. Death Valley National Park is a name applied to a place that has never been managed, cannot be supervised, and is not safe by any definition except the one you bring with you. The sign on Route 190 is still there. Next services 72 miles. It is the most information-dense sentence on any road sign in America if you know how to read it. Fill the tank. Every time. All the way to full. The road does not care. The heat does not wait. And the fuel gauge does not lie. Everything else follows from there.